Good afternoon. I think it's so exciting to see a film like that because you see the influence that these artists had on contemporary large-scale sculpture, architecture, and sculpture, and the innovations that they did. When you think about it, public art that we find today, the Metropolitan Museum of Art Sculpture Garden on top of the roof, what's happening at Rockefeller Center, the Public Art Fund, these artists were instrumental really in changing the whole concept of having large-scale public sculpture, and I think it's really, the film is just wonderful because it really expresses that perfectly. So we're going to jump right in because we only have a little bit of time. So Lana, how did you first meet Claes and Coosje, and how did the film come about?
Well, I met Claes in the 1970s because I edited a film from Michael Blackwood about Claes. And I always loved his drawings and his soft sculptures that his first wife used to sew them together. But more than anything else, he was really a fantastically interesting artist because he also did these happenings in the 60s where it would be unscripted performances by friends and other artists, kind of using props and sets. And so this was in the 60s. So he was really way before that kind of things happening. And so through the years then, in the 80s, there was a show at Leo Castelli Gallery of the props, the costumes, and other objects, which were part of a performance that they had started in Venice in 1985. It's a performance, the title was Il Corso del Coltello, the way of the knife. And what it was besides the performance, they had made this huge knife ship, Swiss Army knife ship, which was floating the Arsenale River. And then on top of that, they had this performance using all these props and costumes. So it's in a way kind of an extension of the happenings coming from the 60s. So when I saw this show at Castelli, I thought, it's fascinating. And I didn't know Coosje until then because they only got married in 1977. And since they got married, they worked very closely together in their collaborations. She was more kind of the person often with challenging him with ideas, and she never yesed him, but it was a wonderful collaboration. Anyway, I met her and I asked them going forward, what were their projects? So they said, well, this knife ship was being remanufactured in Brooklyn and then to bring it to the Guggenheim Museum. So I said, well, that's going to be a feat to try to get that in. And anyway, we talked about, and then they talked about further projects, large-scale projects in different cities in the United States. So I decided it was a really interesting project to maybe pursue. And having also known the lipstick piece from 1969 at Yale that Claes did, one of the first large-scale projects. And so that's when I decided to, together with Nick, to make this film. And unfortunately, Nick couldn't be here today because he's on a shoot in Oklahoma.
Lana, how long did it take to create the film?
It took about 4 years. Because the film, as you see in the film, all these different locations, Miami, Minneapolis, New York City, and Brooklyn, Los Angeles. So it was a big challenge to make this film because we had to follow the construction of these pieces being made and then follow the installation and then dealing with officials. As you probably know, shooting at museums and these public spaces goes through a lot of bureaucracy. But what was really interesting is that they restaged the performance that was in Venice in Los Angeles of the objects and costumes and props and so on. So we also went there and filmed the performance that you saw in the film. It's a restaging they did it's called Coltello Recalled. So we had a lot of different elements to put it together. It was a little complicated because I wrote them all over the place. So that was a big challenge in terms of, putting the film together.
I remember seeing Knife Ship at the Guggenheim, and it just like it was just amazing to see in the central courtyard this mechanism which really filled the entire space, opening and closing, and each level that you were at, you were looking at it from a different perspective, and it was really quite exciting. You see in the film their relationship is so close, but she didn't get equal credit for quite a long time. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? and the women not getting credit?
Well, she was actually a little before her time. First of all, Coosje is from Netherlands. She's an art historian and a curator. And she's a strong personality, very intelligent, very knowledgeable about art history. Certainly no pushover. And so when she married Claes, people in the art world can be very cynical, and they say that she was basically riding on his fame. And so she obviously was very hurtful to her. And so I think she maybe over-exerted her position in their collaboration. Also, as you can see in the film, she can be quite tough or whatever, opinionated. But I think Claes really welcomes somebody who's not yesing him, who challenges him. And I want to quote something that he said in an article, which is really, excuse me. I have endless notes, which I'm not doing. He said that, I felt that any drawings I did after being with her were collaborative because I could never really separate myself from her sensibility and ideas. So there was a collaboration of 33 years until her death. And I think she, as you know, women artists who have famous male partners are often relegated to the secondary position. And she was one of the earlier ones who really asserted herself. And for that, I think she was not always liked. Now, of course, we're lucky women artists can be who they are. But in early 70s and so on, in the 70s, early 80s even, that wasn't so. So give her a lot of credit for standing up. But she's tough. And in order to make this film, I knew my problem was not with Claes, because I knew him already. And I used to have these little dinners in my apartment in New York way back, and with Claes and Jasper and Bobby Short from next door, and Larry Rubin from the Nerdler. They would come have dinners, and they're all very relaxed and chat. So I knew them on a very casual level, and I knew them quite well, so we're friendly. So I had no problem with Claes, but I knew the problem might be Coosje, because she could be, I don't know, whatever the word is. So anyway, I sat her down, we talked, and I said, basically, we can only go forward with this film if we trust each other and respect each other. And as filmmakers, we have to have final cut. We will show you the rough cut, we'll consult with you. If anything you object or is inaccurate, you can point out, but we, the filmmakers, have final say. Otherwise, there would be no film. And she very much respected that. By then, we also had talked quite a bit, because I came from a culture also where women are, Chinese culture, women are always like secondary citizens, so to speak. And so I also, through the years, developed a side of me that's very maybe assertive, and I want to make sure that I'm speaking up my mind, so to speak. So I understand where she's coming from also. And so we bonded quite well, and then she said, absolutely, Lana, do whatever you need to do. So it was a wonderful collaboration in terms of with the artists, with the filmmakers, and with the architect and curators and all the people who worked on the projects.
And I think that's the way it would have to be, obviously, to make a film that's so successful, to really show that relationship all the way through, that she did respect your work, and obviously your decisions had to be the final decisions when creating a film of that magnitude, clearly. I think that when you think about it, you know that like Ilya Kabakov and his wife, Emilia, Jean-Claude and Christo, all of those collaborations, so many times the women really were instrumental in seeing that the projects actually did get completed. I think that Jean-Claude and Emilia much more behind the scenes. But I think when you see this, you really see that Coosje was clearly, the ideas were so much really a true collaboration. Is that
Concepts, yeah, the ideas. And he always signed Claes and Coosje on all their large-scale projects. Later on, he even signed the drawings during the period they were together.
Wonderful.
With both their names, yeah. But I have a funny little story to tell you, though, before they tell us it's time. Anyway, these notes are no good because they're too long-winded. So the story was, in the beginning of the film, you see the knife ship coming into the Guggenheim Museum, and they have built this cocoon in order to protect the environment because they had to open up the walls of the Guggenheim Museum. So in order to come, and when I saw that, I said, oh my God, that reminds me of in Asian cultures, the silkworm, the cocoon coming in, and so I thought, great, I had an idea. At the time, there was a tune based on Madame Butterfly, but sung by Malcolm McLaren. I don't know whether you know him. He's a British musician, very pop hip. So it has a real contemporary beat to a Madame Butterfly melody. And I thought that would be fantastic, perfect way to introduce the film. Well, to make a long story short, we found out that in order to get rights to music, you have to pay a huge amount of money for fees. And we couldn't afford it. And already the budget was getting very high because of all the locations we had to shoot. So we have to give up that, and also very complicated. So we used a bit of the Madame Butterfly background sound. But it was a great pity because when I first had that, it was a wonderful way to introduce the cocoon shot with that McLaren. Anyway, so I thought that was sad, but nevertheless.
Lana, do you have any favorite large-scale pieces of Claes's that really come to mind or have a special significance to you?
Well, in this film, I actually like the knife ship best because of all the different elements. And in a way, as he says, there's a screwy side to the Swiss temperament as well. It's very exact and all that. And I think most of us have different sides to us, and I know I certainly do, I have the crazy Brazilian side, and I'm very Chinese, whatever, comme il faut kind of a. So I like that. And the knife ship also, because they were in different places, it was in Venice, and then Guggenheim, and then Los Angeles. Every location is very different. At the Guggenheim, the screw and the ramps somehow worked really well, it's like mirroring each other. And then in Venice, on the river, the Arsenal is a totally different look. So I like that, all these different parts, of the sculpture, and I think it's also fun.
Lana, you were at the opening of the Palm Beach Museum, and where they have a large Oldenburg right out on the outside of the building, and you screened the film there. And what was the reception like for that?
Well, at the Norton Museum in West Palm Beach, they renovated it, and when they renovated, they put a sculpture by Claes Oldenburg, which is a eraser, typewriter eraser. And some people don't even know what it is because the younger generation never had typewriters. But it was on top of a bed of water, so it mirrored in the water, and it was beautiful. So we decided to show the film that they were very pleased that I had this film, so it was perfect. And we had a good audience then, and the theater was wonderful, sound, and so it was good. So that was in the winter this year.
And Lana, the last question that we'll have.
We have 2 minutes more. Okay,
the last question. I know that you maintain a close relationship with Claes, and so is he aware that we're showing the film today? And
yes, he is aware that we're showing this film. Unfortunately, of course, he couldn't be here. He's 90 years old. So it's wonderful that he's still alive and active, and his mind is all there. He's wonderful. So anyway, I told him that I'll try to get the video of this Q&A and tell him how the audience reacted. So I hope he'll be pleased. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Okay, time's up.